Hi, this is Sonia from An Enthusiastic Reader. Today I'm here to do a Friday Reads. It's been about 5 weeks since I have talked to you about what I've read in the last, over this summer. So I think I have about 5 or 6 books to talk about. I also have a podcast recommendation at the end, and also I'm shouting out a series of videos that people that I really respect and admire are doing to motivate people to take action. So I'll shout that out at the end. So you're asking, what have you been up to? Well, first of all, I've been doing quite a few projects, book projects for clients. So that has kept me pretty busy. I think I worked on 3 or 4 books over the last few weeks, and I have 2 more in the pipe, so I'll be working on those. So that's been positive, and been doing a lot of family time, a lot of TV binging, and a lot of reading. We've also been going through some crazy changes or crazy repair problems, plumbing, just with picture jackhammers, corroded iron pipes, and now a basement that's just down to the studs, just been repainted, and now we have to get new carpet and pad for what happened down there. So I don't want to go too much into it, and there's so many worse things happening in the world than what happened to me, but it's been a really kind of rough and dispiriting few weeks in terms of just things breaking and a lot of money going out to try and get everything fixed, and just trying to stay upbeat as much as possible, and it's hard. So it is a struggle to try and understand everything that's happening in the world and keep it in perspective and figure out what to do about it, if there is anything to do about it. And so that's what I've been doing aside from reading. So the first book I want to talk about is The Nature of the Beast, number 11 in the Armand Gamache series by Louise Penny. If you recall, when I talked about the book number 10, it was a book that I really did not enjoy. I really thought that it was the one book out of the entire series that was not engaging to me. The story was not good. And so I was really looking forward to getting back into vintage Armand Gamache, and that's what happened in book number 11. It was a much better story, and you really got to know much more about all of the characters in Three Pines, their histories, and that's what I love about this series, is that you really do have to read it from the beginning, and you can see character arc development. Characters, have arcs that go from book to book, and sometimes they'll jump a book and then be picked back up again. It's not just all about Armand, the main detective. It's about the people in his sphere, and the murders are often incidental to the story. And so that was great to get back to form and finish that book this week. Okay. The next book I want to talk about is Lady in Waiting, My Extraordinary Life in the Shadow of the Crown by N. Glenconner. Now, Glenconner was actually kind of part of the bubble of aristocracy that surrounds all of the people in this story. No one really outside of the circle is featured or talked about in the story at all. So she's telling the story of her life. She was good friends with Princess Margaret when they were little girls. She's grown up doing all the things that are required of women in this sphere at the time, and the number one goal of this whole endeavor is for good marriages to be made to kind of prop up and keep everything going in the royal family and in those circles of and so since I am not British, I feel like I don't want to be making too many judgments on the entire endeavor. However, it takes an incredible amount of wealth and privilege to keep things going. So on the surface, it's a great story of just one person who is talking about her experience in this world. And so it does open up a window to what it was like to be there. And that's really interesting. And I've always been interested in the idea of royalty, and just, because it's mysterious and it's kind of an inner sanctum kind of situation, and you don't really often get an insider view of it. So I did appreciate that. However, she and her husband, who was extremely mentally ill and very inappropriate, he had huge bouts of rage and totally inappropriate behavior anywhere they went, and she just went along with it. Like, she never really addressed, like, why does this person act this way? Why does he get away with acting this way? And why do I put up with him acting this way? She just kind of poo-pooed it as, like, you know, a character flaw that she was willing to overlook. And I suppose that's true, but I think probably that amount of emotion and rage put a lot of pressure on their children. And so she also tells the story of each of the children that grow up and the tragedies that befall them, and how she and her husband really do not have much hand in raising these kids at all. They have governesses and nannies, and then they're sent away to boarding school or other places, and there's very little day-to-day contact. She didn't really ever apologize for that or seem to regret it. It was just, that's the way it was. So there was that, and you just wonder what it was like for those kids to grow up in those circumstances. But anyway, her husband buys an island, and he tries to, you know, improve the economy for the native people of this island. But it was just kind of gave you a weird colonial feeling that did not feel good. So all in all, I'm really glad I read it. I thought it was an interesting look at a life most of us will never know. And I think I gave it 3.5 stars. There's been interesting chatter on some videos I watched recently about the value of memoir. And I think a memoir like this, even if it wasn't a perfect book, it's a piece of time, a piece of history, and a perspective that if you read a lot of memoirs together from the same time period, you're going to get a kaleidoscope view of the way the world was at a particular time and place. And I think that's valuable maybe as a biography or a history book, because you're getting it from lots of different perspectives and not just an academic view or just not a journalistic view. So the next book I want to talk about is called Impersonation by Heidi Pitlor. Heidi Pitlor is the editor for the Best American Short Stories series. So she will work with a famous writer, and she will present a bunch of short stories to that writer, and then together they will select the 20 stories or so that go in each year's anthology. So that's what she does for her day job. And I did see her speak once. She's a really interesting woman, and she's written this novel that worked for me on a couple of levels and then did not work for me on other levels. So it's kind of a comic look at right now. It's set in the Trump era, and it's about a ghostwriter. And so this woman, she's close to 40, or she's late 30s, early 40s. She has a son. She's a single parent, and she's a ghostwriter. And so she's really dependent on the authors that she is contracted with to follow through, do everything they say they will do, and work with her to create whatever it is their vision for their book that she is ghostwriting. And at the very beginning of the book, she's ghostwriting for this producer, and he's, you know, a real jerk, and he eventually is accused by several different women of sexual assault. And so the book gets canceled. She loses out all of her money that she had planned on to live on working on this particular book, and she's kind of desperate to do another book. And an opportunity comes along there's this woman who's has immigrated from Europe, and she is a very prominent feminist, and so she's a feminist social critic, and she wants to write a memoir about motherhood. And as the two of them work together, you find out that this woman doesn't really want to provide any personal information for this memoir. She'll do everything she can to avoid answering questions about her involvement with her child. And so it makes it very hard to ghostwrite a book when you are given zero content. So the novel works on the level of like showing what it's like to be a ghostwriter and what might be like, and also what it's like to be a single parent who is really trying to raise a child without any gender stereotypes. He's a boy, but just to be kind of gender neutral, or any expression that this boy has is accepted. And of course her parents don't agree with this, and people in society don't like it that he's a very sensitive boy. And so there's that aspect of it. And Where it did not work for me is not that topic or that concept. Text of the novel, the omniscient narrator and the beliefs of the main character are just taught as lessons in the book instead of just showing us through example or toning down the rhetoric. And so I feel like I was half reading a textbook and half reading a novel. It was just too heavy-handed. I have nothing against politics or a political novel, but I didn't think it was handled particularly well, and I didn't feel like I actually knew the characters very well, because I felt like there was an agenda to really talk about these different issues in the form and the guise of a novel. So I gave it 3 stars, I think. It was not a bad read, and I'm glad I read it. The next novel I read and absolutely loved, a 5-star read, was Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell. And you may have heard other people talking about this really fantastic kind of imagining of the life and the family life of William Shakespeare. So you hear a lot about him in history and through his plays and through the, exhaustive academic study of his plays, all of the different interpretations, but you very rarely hear anything about his family, and there isn't, in fact, much written about what it was like for his wife, his children, his parents, when Shakespeare is off, living in London and producing brilliant plays. And so this novel imagines that his wife was a very intuitive and very skilled at healing. And so she was kind of an empath. And Shakespeare is very young when they meet, and they fall in love and get married against the wishes of her stepmother. And O'Farrell has, admitted that she has imagined a lot of what happened. So it's not historically accurate. So I wouldn't necessarily call it a historical novel, but I would call it just kind of a brilliant imagination of what their lives were like, and how they were feeling, and how they missed their father when he wasn't there. And then what happens when the plague hits their house. And there's a really great scene in this book about the origination of the germs that come from Italy through a glass blower all the way on a ship, all the way to England, and then infect Shakespeare's children. And I thought it was just a really great way to put it into a more humane and personal circumstance that, we hear about these diseases and these pandemics, but to see the pathway from person to person to person and the animals that are involved to transmit the bacteria. So it was really, I don't know if bacteria is the right word, so you know what I mean, the pathogen that created the plague. So I wept. I was doing a morning walk, and I got to a very particular sad spot in the novel, and I was listening to the audiobook, and I just burst out into tears, and I had to sit down, and it was on a bench by a tennis court in our neighborhood. And this woman, I thought I was by myself, and this woman came around the corner with her dog, and she saw me just sobbing. And then I was so embarrassed, because it's like, she's like, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Yes." And I was just reading a sad book. And she just kind of quizzically looked at me and kept walking. So that's not really what I had wanted to happen, but that's what happened. And anyway, it's a very good book. It would be a great book club book, I think. And the writing was just stunning. I think this is definitely her, a pinnacle in her writing career so far. The last book I want to talk about is called Nothing But Dust. It's translated from the French. It takes place in Argentina in the 1800s, and it is written by Sandrine Collette, and it's translated by Alison Anderson, and it was a 5-star read. This was such a great, it's kind of like a hybrid or a subversion of the Western, because it takes place on a cattle and sheep ranch. And it's about this very dysfunctional family, a woman and her 4 sons, all exist on their own to take care of all these animals on this ranch. And beef is dying out in the area where they are, and the profitable part of this ranch are the sheep. So they are shearing, they're working so hard herding and shearing, and the boys ride horses the boys do all the work essentially. The mother does very little. She directs them, but she also manipulates them and is terrorizing them. And they all don't like each other either. So it's a whole house of animus and very visceral work, like the descriptions of how hard they work and how tired they are at night and how dedicated they are to making their mother happy, yet they all don't like each other. And the two oldest boys are twins, and they gang up on the younger boys, and especially the youngest. They are just relentless to him, and yet he has this spirit that you do root for. You do care about this character, and you are very invested in the outcome of what happens to all these people on this ranch. So I can't say enough about it. I can't wait to read more books by Sandrine Collette, because she has, it's kind of like, I want to say Steinbeck in description and in how important the land and descriptions of the land are in the lives of these people. But it's mostly a psychological thriller with a Western. So I urge somebody to give it a try. I think somebody who's watching this will really like this book. And so that's my book recommendation. Guess what? That's all the books I have to talk about right now. I am currently reading a book about Benjamin Franklin's sister Jane, and it's by Jill Lepore. And I'm like 30% done. It's pretty long, so it's taking me a while to get through. But it's really interesting to see the life of Benjamin Franklin, but through the lens of his sister Jane, who was not given any opportunity for education and who constantly is living in grief because almost everyone in her life, her many children, her many grandchildren, her sisters and brothers, her parents, all die, and they die frequently. And so she has this little book. It's called The Book of Ages. That's what it's called. She has this book where she records the deaths of all the people she knows. And so she does have a correspondence with Franklin, and it's kind of recreated even with the misspelling. So it takes a while to read because you're reading her vernacular and then some of his letters back. But it's teaching history, but it's also giving a different skewed or tilted, I won't say skewed, but it's a tilted perspective on the history that we think we know about Ben Franklin. So it's pretty interesting. I'm enjoying it, and I'm not sure what novel I'm going to pick up next, but I plan on reading a few more novels this upcoming month, and I also will read some Shakespeare. Probably committing to reading Hamlet, because I know that the people who are doing the ShakeTube project in September are all culminating in Hamlet at the end of the month. So I think I can commit to doing that, and that's my plan. But I always plan on things, and sometimes it doesn't work out, so we will see what the future holds. I wanted to shout out a few videos. Sarah from Hardcover Hearts has started a project, and she's recruited some other people that make videos regularly, and it is called From Books to Action, Get to Work Wednesdays. And so far there have been 3 videos about little things that people can do to get motivated and to act in this crazy world, and to not just sit and feel hopeless, but to have concrete things to do to make sure you're registered to vote, you pick a cause you care about, and what you can do to support that cause. Just what little things and what little actions can we take to make the world a better place by accumulation. So I've linked all 3 videos that are out so far, from Sarah and from Alba from Seriella and from Brian at Bookish. They've all made really good videos with things to think about and good resources in the show notes. So check that out. And I wanted to recommend a podcast I've been listening to. I just finished it. It's called Nice White Parents. It's done by the people who produced Serial, but now it's owned by the New York Times. And it's really interesting analysis of how white parents have so much power in the public school system, and how segregation is or integration is kind of hampered by the whims and wishes of parents who have much more money and clout and political power to affect things on even like the parent-teacher association level. So they explored this one school in Brooklyn and the history of how it was founded, and how white parents keep coming in to try and change things, while people of color have just been going to this school for 40 or 50 years. So it's pretty interesting. So that's all I have to recommend right now. I hope you're safe. I hope you're well. I hope you're hanging in there. I know a lot of people online seem to be like hitting a wall in terms of just being able to keep going with everything that's happening. And I guess just do what you can and take care of yourselves. And I thank you for watching my video, and for subscribing or just watching. And I look forward to talking to you soon. Bye.